So yeah, this is a story, it's an unusual one compared to the ones that we have seen until now. The story has happened between the years of 2008 and 2015. And what I've done here was, what would this story would be if you have KMM at the time? We didn't have a lot of the resource, the Kanban resource that we have today. And this is my attempt about retelling this story through the lens of the Kanban maturity model. Let's see how it went. So a little bit about me. Now I'm living in Australia. I've moved there in 2017, but I'm from Brazil. And this story has happened in Brazil. I'm a Kanban trainer, I'm a KT, and now I'm a dev manager at Envato. Envato is an Australia-based company, and they have tools and they are a marketplace for the creation of digital assets. So a lot of things that you're going to see in my presentation here from Envato that I got from there. And in 2014, I won the Brickle Key Award. Brickle Key Award is an award that's given by the Kanban conferences in the Lean Kanban North America. There are two main categories in there. One for people who gave great contribution to the Kanban body of knowledge. So here I have Klaus Leopold. Klaus Leopold is the author of Kanban 5 levels and blocker clustering and a lot of nice stuff. And then we have a category for less known people like me who had interesting uses of Kanban. So that's it. Let's talk about Petrobras. So I've worked for Petrobras for 8 years. And Petrobras is the biggest oil and gas company in South America. So for us, it's a big national symbol. Like people and young people, like I was at the time, was very proud of getting to that company. So when you get there, you have the national anthem. So it's a very big symbol for the country. It's formed by, the structure is about business units. So the main business unit is about oil and gas production and exploration. And also some supportive areas like IT. And the IT area is also segmented by business support. Our IT area was one of the most important IT areas of Petrobras at the time that was supportive of the main business of oil and gas exploration. And this is our structure. So we had the software development area, the area that I was in, plus the area of database and infrastructure. You see, very functional. And let's see what we could do with this structure here. The software development area was formed by 293 people, 4 departments with approximately 30 teams. It's called SNAP, the software development area. And one of the most important things, sorry, oops, this is dangerous. One of the most important things that's going to be a very important part of our story, like we have seen since yesterday, a forward thinker manager. He was the enabler of everything that's happening here. Okay, let's understand a little bit more about the structure. We had 2 main logical divisions here. So one, the orange one, we used to call the corporate systems, the area that took care of corporate systems. They're not the main business stuff. The main business stuff was around this area here that I'm going to talk soon. So that area would take more of admin stuff to support the business of oil and gas production and exploration. This area was very functional. So the blue dots, we have teams formed by developers and leaders. And the other stuff, they're contained in their own cells, functional cells of works. So we have quality assurance, database, and designers. On the green side, we have the core, the teams that support the core business. So here we have a lot of specific, sometimes scientific systems supporting the really core activities of oil and gas production and explorations. Those guys were self-contained, so at the time, pretty good fit for Scrum teams. They have their own product owners that many times was the customer. And we have the red dots, the no methodology teams. So pay attention to this one because I'm going to talk about them very soon. All right, and we had a team that wasn't made by design. It started with me and Christine having some ideas about to make improvements. And then we start having some allies, and you make this structure formal with our influence. At the time, we thought that we could make a big revolution from the bottom to top. We discovered that it wasn't that case, so there was a lot of learnings along the way. But we got a lot of things, even trying from the bottom to top because of an enabling leadership. And we have a lot of disciplines here, like with Kanban, Agile, culture, a lot of DevOps people that enable our technical process to improve, database and software development. So we used to state that our purpose was to help teams to get into a statement of continual delivery and improvement. All right, the timeline. So in 2008, we started with Agile with our first Scrum team. In 2009, we started scaling, one team at a time, without rush, without restructuring, just using what we had at the moment. In 2011, we start with visualization, Kanban visualization, 2013 with metrics, and 2015 another story begins. So this is the scope of my talk here, and all along the timeline, we trying to get major in our technical practices. The experience was not a rose-through path. A lot of the challenge that you're used to, like culture, many teams, interface with other areas, low interest in the adoption of technical practice, and people working together for so many time. And what we do, very tight. Okay, the other thing, are the things that you are changing long-lasting? Because it's very easy to do a reorg, oh, we are agile now, and so on, but for how long, right? And have they really translated into results? So this is what we had. Some teams, they had great results and kept improving. So many factors to vary. Leadership of that team might be one of the main things, different purpose, and a lot of stuff. Others got better, but took some steps back. Others stays the same. But fortunately, no team got worse than before. So it took me a while to start seeing some agile failures. I haven't seen this because it was evolutionary. So you're doing some small steps. If it didn't work, you roll back. And you keep going like, we didn't have this kind of thing for 6 years and a bit more of this agile journey. All right, how to promote long-lasting changes. At some time, we have happiness at level 2, right? We have a lot of Scrum teams, you are happy workers, we are very motivated about using this new stuff called Agile. We have consistent process, right? We could say we run Scrum, and they've run Scrum properly. I had a lot of teams with very good results just with Scrum, because their scenario was good for Scrum. They have one product owner, they have one self-contained team, that's fine, it was working for them. Our customers are relatively happy, and we have some rudimentary portfolio Kanban. So some of the behaviors that could see at that point in time. Okay, so we were optimizing for the software development area, but database and infrastructure, they were lagging behind, and we need them. So to deploy, just for you to understand, we couldn't do any new feature without involving the database area. If you're lucky, if you didn't have to change the database, we wouldn't need them. But if you have to change, we need intervention from them. And to deploy, in the end, we would need infrastructure. So we're talking about the time that we didn't have automated deploy and this kind of stuff. And the bottlenecks were moving. We were operating quite well at the software development areas, but from the end-to-end perspective. And okay. So Dave Anderson, he gave his second training in Brazil in 2010. So this picture is not from 2010, 2012. And the only reason I know exactly the date of this low resolution that I was pregnant, I remember that on this day I was very sick, despite my happiness in this picture. So it was a moment that I remember with happiness, with a bit of trouble at the time. And then I met Alisson Vale. Alisson was the pioneer of Kanban in Brazil. And he had one, so Alisson was also the first Brickell Key Award for his initiative. And it was amazing. It was mind-blowing. At the time, there wasn't anything, and I had the luxury of having him as my mentor. He stayed for a bit time with us at Petrobras. And I hired him to help us, especially with this challenge with the other areas. So our initial idea was trying to convince, so, okay, we're running okay, level 2 here at the software development area, but how can we do this connection? So our idea was try to convince the managers from the infrastructure and database areas to start with Kanban, right? We could connect the whole process, and we've done presentation to them, oh, this is interesting. And then, okay, we could keep running Scrum with software development areas, and we can try to implement some Kanban systems in the other areas. That thing about Kanban working, have a good match with service delivery, and then we failed miserably. This didn't work, right? So they didn't put the effort to make it work. It was someone from other area trying to change. Who's you? Who are you guys? Even with our manager for the software development area being very supportive. They were peers and we couldn't influence them. All right, that's fine. I had Allison. Petrobras is a half-shared public and shareholders company. So contracts, we do a contract, you have a time, I had him there. And what do we do with him? How could we use his service now that the original plan has failed? Okay, let's work inside the software development area. After all, there are some things that you can improve. Let's talk a little bit about services. All right, we have the areas there. This structure worked for many years like this, right? Trying to change very abruptly would cause a lot of resistance. There's a lot of identity related. And we thought that if you think at a time where there was this agile thing, or everyone should go cross-functional, we could do a restructuring of this area, right? Split everyone, let's just create cross-functional team, but it wasn't what we've done at the time, right? We were very careful about this one. And also there were economical reasons why this possibly wouldn't be a good approach to make everyone work in cross-functional team. So what we're doing there, we recognize, okay, we cannot trash everything in the rubbish. If it's working, let's use the best what is working and try to improve a little bit more. Okay, let's start area by area, database areas, right? So the database area, how do I use this one? This one? Okay, I cannot use the highlighter here. The database area takes care of the huge oil and gas company, the data of the Petrobras, right? So a lot of confidential data, a lot of controls about how to access compliance stuff. So they didn't want developers messing up with the data. And there was a group where this area, inside the software development area, we have this database group. They have more trust with the database area outside, right? So they add where it's, okay, no, we trust these guys to do the interface between the developers and the database. Other than you, we do not allow you to do anything, right? If we break this group here, we could break something that we had, that was this relationship of trust with the other area. So they helped the interaction between the software development. So what we have done, we've Kanbanized this database. We've done everything like experiments. So our first experiment was always what we can do preserving the current ways of working that we have. So we have preserved this group, and the experiment worked, right? So I do not have data for this one, but we've done at this time a qualitative assessment just by asking the teams that were being served by this group. So the time that you're receiving the database alterations are okay, you have no complaints about it, can you keep going? And that's fine. So one thing that it's not because you have a functional group, there's absence of collaboration. We have this group that had a specialization, but there were higher levels of collaboration and understanding between this database group and the software developers, right? So that's fine. The level of service provided was okay, and we had no complaints. Next experiment, QAs as a service. So for this one, we had already thinking that, well, this probably is not going to work, but we're going to run the experiment in the same way, right? There was a strong identity. I'm a QA. There was a leader of QAs, and trying to break this thing would be a big rock to fight. Okay, they were a traditional testing group. They received documentation that was prepared by the team so they could test. So if you think about an Agile, when we were trying to go Agile, reducing the levels of documentation, this was the first thing, right? The teams had to produce documentation that otherwise would be too much needed, just to hand over to the QAs without adding too much value. And then we tried to run with similar way, like with a Kanban system for the QAs, but we had constant complaints from the developers. It wasn't working at all. It was clear for everything that wasn't working. Now it would be easy to change, right? So our approach was to split. We got the QAs and we split them in some teams. The decision was based on the criticality of each one of the systems, and some teams just stay without that QA person and they have to develop their own capability of testing internal to the team. All right, designers as a service. So if you think at the time and considering internal systems, the UX and design need wasn't that much. So we decided to try this experiment, like preserving the designer group as a service, right? And most of the teams, due to the nature, didn't need full designers all the time. And we've run the experiment. This one that was the most successful of all of them. We had metrics for this one. So for each request that the designers received, they would assign a t-shirt size. If for each one of the t-shirt sizes, there were some service level expectations. So the numbers that we had for them, so most of the time they had a due date performance of 90% of meeting expectations, plus the verbal, the narratives assessment with the software developed. It's working, it's fine, so you're happy, that's it, it worked. Developers and leaders saying that everything was okay. The learning. There's life beyond multidisciplinary teams, right? So not every service needs to be provided by a multidisciplinary team. It all depends on the context, right? Just analyze, see your context, evaluate, and see if it's working. If it's not working, you change. But do not start from a point. You can start with assumptions, like, for example, the assumptions that we started that the QAs wouldn't work. We prove it right, but until you test it, it's just an assumption. Oh, good. Let's keep improving. Visualize everything. So we started a cycle about bringing everything to the surface. So one of the challenges in trying to increase the maturity of our technical practices, the adoptions, was very basic at the time, but was just having everyone having continuous integration and taking care of the continuous integration, right? And this was also taken as an experiment. Our first screen was not that big, it was just a small monitor. And one interesting thing about this one is that we have provided a level of transparency that we didn't have at the moment about how the teams were keeping their code on a daily basis. And one of the values that you used in this one was respect. So before bringing up this visualization, and you're seeing a lot of red tiles, we had a conversation with the team saying, look, we are thinking about doing this thing, making visible the status of your build. How do you feel about it? And one of them said one thing that I remember until today, that was, Amanda, I think that's an embarrassment, but it's a good embarrassment. So this was acting like a stressor, so to make the call for action, right? So the result was that by the time we put the monitor with the visualization in our work area, we have everything green in 1 week, because people start to moving by themselves without being, we didn't need to be directive about it. They just felt the need. They didn't want to be embarrassed with the other teams and their peers. And we keep going. The other challenge, we want to reduce the technical debt. And here we have a lot of categories. We gamified. This took a while. We wrote, if you're interested in that topic of technical debt, in my LinkedIn there's a link to an article that wrote this entire experience, what was, how we use gamified practice to help the teams move and making them motivated to move, to reduce. Then after 1 year, we could count on a reduction of 30% of technical debt, considering those categories that there. And it involves like unity tests, automatic build, continuous integration, and so on. Another interesting thing about this technical debt in continuous integration initiative, I remember that we spent almost a year trying to make teams feel motivated about going by themselves. Also didn't work, right? We were trying everything, we had the gamified board, but wasn't getting traction. And then we had a conversation with that manager and say, you need to do something. We need an act of leadership. And there are two things that happens that change the game. One thing, he said publicly in one of our all hands meetings, I care about this thing. So I want to see you improving on that stuff. And each one of the middle managers, because he was a senior manager, each one of the middle managers started attending the meetings where we reviewed the status of the technical debt. Almost without saying anything, just their presence there, showing with their behavior, I care about this thing. And things just start to happen, right? So we have scaled, so now we see like probably 60 systems being tracked for each one of the areas. And we start visualizing everything that you can think of. Project portfolios to bring to the surface, to have some face with customer satisfaction, and everything. Strategic planning, process modeling, so bringing transparency and visualization to the roofs. And a lot of team Kanban boards. So some details we had at the time, the boards were very meaningful for each one of the teams, despite of the fact that some of them work in very similar ways. Each one of them we didn't have static at the time. We have our own ways to identify what was the flow, how would that work. So we can identify some elements like that are known to us today: commitment points, options, per person whip limits all over the place, the complete flow until production. Some parking lot to visualize blocker, dependent work, and other service. That was a thing for us. And we started with many physical boards. Like, we have a lot. It was very useful. We learned a lot about our internal process. But we moved buildings, punctuation point, right? Things have changed, and we need to adapt. The space has changed. The space wasn't very good for the physical boards. You could have some others not. And what appears in every story, you have Jira. Like all those meaningful boards that we have built with a lot of thought and understanding about what the process should like, we had to translate in a lot of columns and some swim lanes. That's fine. So some teams started using Jira. We lost some things, but we've gained others. Remember those red no methodology teams? Let's talk about them. Okay, who were those guys? They supported the core business of production of oil and gas and water. So each one of them was controlling the production, because when you produce oil and gas, you have also a lot of water that's produced that you need to take into account and provide information to regulatory agencies and so on. So they were the guys. Each team, they had an average of 10 years of existence, right? So very senior, working with a legacy technology called Centura, senior in experience and in age, critical systems. If they stop, Petrobras loses billions, right? And the development was regulated by Sarbanes-Oxley. So companies that have actions in the what's the name? In the New York, what, sorry? New York Stock Exchange. Stocking, exactly. Yes, thank you. So if you have companies that have stocks, some process needs to be regulated by Sarbanes-Oxley. So this development was highly controlled. Okay, conclusion for these red teams. No agile kids around here. So who are you coming here to say to us to stand up, have physical boards and so on? So for some years, despite of the fact that a lot of teams were moving to Agile and running scrums, we didn't mess up with those guys. Let them there. They're delivering, okay, that's fine. But they have been delivering results with inconsistent process and many times with heroic efforts, right? Level 1 behavior that we are used to see. And from a specific problem, an opportunity arises, another punctuation point. It all started with their delivery manager asking for my help. And Amanda, can you hide who's doing what in Jira? And the question was, well, there is no way of doing it unless you want to lose track of who is doing what. And this wasn't an option. Remember that this is a regulated software development process, right? There's no way to hide from him. But why do you want to do this? And then come the questions from the team. The customer wants to control our work. He wants to say who does what in the team. He said he will come here every week. He keeps snooping Jira daily to see who is doing what. What has changed? This team has been working together for 10 years. So the behavior. So customers with a sufficient transparency, they would have a preference about choosing people who they think that they are going to deliver faster to him, right? He wants to mitigate risk of inconsistency. So I know I assign work directly to these people, to a team that I do not have control of. But I keep trying this behavior, and in general the reasons because the deliveries are not meeting the expectations with poor performance and delivery inconsistency. All right, so what was happening? They think that after years of a relationship with their previous customer, these 10 years, he has retired and a new customer has come. So can you imagine how to build a 10-year relationship with a new customer and consider that he doesn't have any transparency about what's going on? 3 teams, same customer, similar problems. All right, so definitely hiding who was doing what in Jira wouldn't help this team to make it better, right? Because there was a trust problem. So we would need reliable process and outcomes to establish this new relationship. And the customer could trust in the teams. All right, on the path to level 3, let's see some actions. So we invited this new customer, and I was lucky at the time. This customer, he was a production engineer. And production engineer in general, they have lean foundations. And sometimes this kind of thinking makes more sense to them, even more than traditional project manager. So we had this thing on our side. So we scheduled a meeting with him, trying to explain the changes that we would like to implement. Very simple changes. Something like, nothing would change too much, except for the fact that you want to start a scheme of limited prioritization. If you want to prioritize something, something must leave, and avoid prioritize what have already started. Only prioritize what you really need. We told him that we are going to run this as an experiment. If you're not satisfied, we just roll back, right? So it was really clear that we're trying to make the situation improve. And then yesterday we saw in David's presentation his formula for evolutionary change. So an stressor, a reflection mechanism, and leadership. We have everything. So the scenario was a good scenario for us to keep trying to make the changes. All right, let's navigate to the Kanban practice in the way that we implemented with them. So visualize. So we had 2 main flows, one customer flow, end-to-end, for prioritization, and until the customer know when one thing was deployed. Then you had also the software development flow, more detailed, a lot of Jira rules underneath it because it was a SOX-related system. So as an example, before starting some work, this work needs to be approved by the customer. When you finish some work, this work needs to be acknowledged by the customer. If the person who developed cannot be the same one who tests the software, there's a lot of rules governing the system. So yeah, these were the two flows. WIP limits, before setting the WIP limits, we had kind of 20 items in progress for a 3-people team. And we start decreasing slowly. So, okay, now we have those 20 items. Let's agree with the customer and nothing new is going to enter. If you want to remove something that was prioritized and have it start, that's fine. But let's slowly decreasing this number, going to 15, 10, and now to give time for them to get used to the new approach. And manage flow, the use of metrics. We're going to see a lot of rudimentary metrics here. Nothing sophisticated like we have today, but they served us at the time to be reflection mechanisms, to be stressors for us to understand what was going on, what was going wrong, right? So cumulative flow. So we start here, the contrast not very good, but what you can see here, a lot of things waiting for deploy, and we start working. And then we have less WIP waiting for deploy. What the heck is going on there? Not know. And then a managed WIP, right? Okay, another example. The work starts, and then we have a tiny WIP limit, and then the coach leaves. And things start to derail, not respecting WIP limit at all, going back to normal with a bit wide WIP limits. The fact that we started looking at this kind of stuff, like making use of the pool Jira charts that we had, plus some Excel spreadsheets. This team here, very weird cumulative flow with some pouches along the way. This team was performing really well. The customer was really satisfied with them. What was the problem? Lack of proper update of the tool, right? So sometimes the charts, we need to understand what's behind, because the chart wasn't matching what I was seeing. This is why important for you to have the narratives together with the charts. Some other control charts, this team clearly making better. This one, what's going on, it's increasing a little bit, but they have lower lead times compared to the other one. And this team clearly decreasing the lead times, right? Okay, let's work now problem by problem and see the solutions for each one, the hypothesis actually. First one, the customer is not satisfied with our throughput. He also says that things take too long to finish. Let's understand what's behind. Okay, we created this cumulative type chart, stacking all the work items that we wanted to track. So one of the hypotheses was that this team, the same team that developed the software, was receiving too many support calls. And this was preventing them to focus on getting work done, getting features deployed. When we plot the chart, this is what we see. The red line, the red area was the number of tickets that a 3-people team received per month. We noticed that the customer was using the development team as a support team when he would need to develop this capability inside his business. So it was very convenient. And the hypothesis was validated. So what we tried to do to maximize the value-adding activities while trying to minimize the other ones that didn't like even presence in meetings. So sometimes you have this question, should we track this work item type or not? It depends. If you do not want to derive, because the main thing is to track the value-adding work, but sometimes tracking the non-value-adding work is useful for you to understand what are the kind of stuff that you want to minimize. In our case, we want to minimize the presence in meetings, the yellow line, the advisory, the gray line, support, red, and of course the number of defects. And here just highlighted the number of support calls decreasing. The interesting thing about this initiative is that we've done nothing. What we've done, we've plotted the chart, we showed to the customer, and he has done something there where the number of calls started decreasing. So just a visualization, so I had this experience many times, just a visualization provokes something that people, some of the people might move to action, right? And then when they're not moving enough, you get the leadership powers to make the things happen. Throughput, overview, have some teams who were more consistent, some others could have months without delivering anything. Yeah, we just start tracking. You see a lot of uses of averages here, and especially, I'm going to talk about average when I talk about the lead time. Problem, customer complained that it take too long to deliver features. What was behind this statement? Hypothesis. The main part of the time that the feature is taking to be deployed, it's not dependent on us. So the orange lines were the times that, did you remember that in the SOX process, the customer needs to approve? So the orange area is the time for the customer to approve. When you plotted the chart, it was 73% of the time. So if the feature took 10 days, so 7 days was waiting for the customer to approve. So if you look from flow efficiency, just 30%, but overall 50% in the hands of the development teams, and you know that's lower than this, right? That's it. When you show to him, why haven't you showed to me this before? He didn't know that he was having so much impact on the delivery times. Defect rate, so we start tracking the rate of features deployed with the number of failures that you have. So you can see this team going to 0 in a lot of months. Increase a bit to 3%, what's not that bad. So a lot of teams closed every month with 0 defects, with a backlog of defects completely finished. And the average lead time. So at this time, we just want to have a better view for improving our process. So average can be okay if you want to track, not okay if you want to do forecasts, but for us we can clearly see we have this spike, and this is common because we're finishing a lot of stuff that was there waiting to be completed. And once we finish those old stuff, we start really better, really improving and decreasing the average lead time to deliver stuff. Policy explicit to have a good definition of our work item types, because we want to be able to evaluate if something was value adding or non-value adding. Visible policies in the team area, so stand-up policies, WIP policies, JIRA policies, work item type definitions, and so on. We had weekly replenishing meetings with the customer. So we had exactly 5 slots where he could fill the next items that you want to develop. And if you have available slots, fill the next one. And monthly service delivery review with the delivery managers and the team, right? We would analyze the data, what has happened, and opportunities for improvement. In my career, was the first time that I had the opportunity to see metrics being meaningful for teams. They see value of this, and for the manager. Because in general, metrics just are a value, the team doesn't care about it, but they couldn't understand, they like seeing their picture, how they're delivering, how their times were improving. So this is a tip for managers analyzing metrics with team members, the poker face, right? Because if the team notices that you're having feelings like, this lead time's not going so well, this kind of thing, they can game they can start gaming the metrics easily, right? So I've done a lot of coaching with the delivery managers to be neutral during this meeting and being facilitators. So some of them started to running by themselves without my presence and without messing up with the data. Stand-up meetings, we started doing with the 3 teams. Some of them decided to keep, some others not, right? And that's okay. We need to remember that we're 3 to 4 people working together for many years. They had good communication amongst them. It wasn't an issue. They sit close to each other. And also the new boards brought to them a much more visualization what they had before. And then we kept going like for years with this cycle of problem visualization, metrics, result, hypothesis, problem, and we keep doing a lot of small improvements that in the end build a great thing, right? And many, like I was saying, many of these problems were solved without us having to take any actions, just bringing the things to the surface. So there was no need to hide from the customer who was doing what. He stopped asking about it. And there's some still minor attempts of trying to assign tasks, but the delivery manager with an act of leadership say, okay, you see that the system working, just trust in the system, and you're gonna take care of your requests. So teams got more visibility about their own activities. So they achieved such a good software development process that this process became a benchmark in the company in terms of SOX compliance, right? So compliance, tick. done. The frequency of replenishing meetings started to decrease. He started to prioritize direct in Jira, doing like on replenishing demand. There's a slot available, go there, move the next stuff. He knew exactly what was happening. It was very visible to him. He stopped appearing. This was not exactly what we want to, but yeah, this was a collateral effect. Some observable behaviors that we can have from this story here. So we had a consistency of process. It was a regulatory compliance process being followed over and over again. Customer expectations were being met. Now he trusts that the team could deliver on his promise and what he was asking for. We have demand balance against capacity, no heroic efforts needed, a metrics and reporting strategy, and the service was fit for purpose. The customer was okay with it, and this replacement turned into a good story that could keep going. Okay, some other things. Did you remember the database and infrastructure areas? We didn't have the intervention that we thought at the moment, but after they were seeing our results and we put a lot of efforts in improving their relationship with them, they started to see the value, started adopting some common practice and improving their service delivered to us. So after these 3 teams, 5 more teams from the other teams adopted the same approach of service delivery reviews. And looking back, I could see all of the values in there and how did this turn up into a good story, but with the main one in the center, that was a leadership. We had an enabler leadership, the senior manager, that's the first one on the top left, being a high maturity leadership behavior, cascading to the other leaders, and in my opinion, that was the secret sauce. That's it. Any questions, or too hungry to make any questions? Hopefully it wasn't so painful. No? There's a question here. Oh?
How did you sync the physical boards and the digital boards? Did you have physical boards that you used with Kanban? How did you sync those?
Oh, how did I sync? Yeah. So Jira is very limiting, right? So as we had those rich boards, we couldn't do this anymore. So one of the approach was to have simple boards. It was not that case from the regulatory systems, right? Because it was a controlled workflow. So from a moment we just stopped using the physical board and you just kept the digital board. But when we had to synchronize, in general what the teams used to do was to keep a simple version in Jira. Just to be able to track it. You can have a more rich workflow, more rich representation, and try to translate into doing done or some other columns that you might have. But it's always painful, right? But some teams liked the collaboration in front of the physical board, so it was up to them. There was any hard requirement about how they should, just for the regulatory compliance system, they should abide, but they were okay with it and they wouldn't challenge.